Hey guys, welcome to Rewriting the Narrative. Mare, how are you today? Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. This is a Thanksgiving weekend for our Canadian crew people. So we'll just say happy Thanksgiving. And to everybody else, we'll just say happy honorary Thanksgiving. You might want to have a second one now in October if you'd like. But feeling, I'm going to say this, I'm not going to lie. I'm feeling the week. I'm feeling the week. It's a Friday. Body was like, oh, girl.
We're both just transparently, both of us had HRVs that were tanked today. So, which again, sometimes it's a good thing, right? Like sometimes it's like we're doing some big girl things and with that, like body is the scorecard. I know the body keeps score is what people like to say, but I think I heard this from Gaber Mate. Have you ever heard of Gaber
Yeah.
Mate? 10 out of 10 would recommend his books to anybody here listening that's maybe kind of interested in that mind body connection.
Mhm.
Um, he definitely goes into like the science as well as like the psychology and like emotional aspects of things. But anyway, even if it is like the good stuff, the body definitely is that scorecard, and that's something that he says.
Yeah.
We also had moons in the air as
Had
well.
like 4 full moons, like big, massive, beautiful full moons from I think it was Sunday, last night we didn't, but like Sunday through Wednesday. So, and I was
Yeah.
totally, I know you were too, like both of us were like riding this energy, like wow, this energy. But that I was definitely come Wednesday, I think I said to Sarah, like, man, like this spaceship, this rocket ship she's starting to run out of fuel
Well,
right now.
Mare had a birthday as well for anybody here listening. So it was Mare's birthday on Tuesday. So we had a lot. And I know this is a topic that has definitely been a long time coming. We're going to dive into GLP-1s today. That said, this is an enormous topic. And for your brains and for our brains, we are going to be specific and kind of focus in on, I mean, honestly, like the women, we work with and the cases, where this is a part of, their plan and the conversations that we're having. This came up yesterday in our group mentorship chat with our coaches, is how to best support our clients when they are choosing, to be on a GLP-1. So, like I said, we could definitely kind of go down several rabbit holes, but today we kind of want to focus more so on women's health, hormonal health, and how these drugs can potentially help women from a metabolic health and inflammation standpoint to support, their hormonal health and just holistically offer some support. So, we're not going to give you a whole PubMed dissertation here, but let's first, everyone is talking about them, right? It's the thing. Like, I can't not hear it on the TV. Like, everybody is talking about, whatever it is. So, you want to kick it off as far as maybe a little bit of historical context?
Yeah, I think I'll start with a lot of people say, so it's about looking at GLPs, whether we're talking about, I think semaglutide is the one, or Ozempic is the one that most people started talking about first. Now we have tirzepatide, we have retatricide, like obviously more generations are coming. A lot of conversations started up with Ozempic, semaglutide, and how new it was. And I think like historical wise, we have to go back and understand this was actually approved by the FDA, which means they were using it prior to, but actually approved for diabetes by the FDA back in 2017. So it's been around a while. And there's definitely been, again, semaglutide, Ozempic's not even like the first generation. Like it's, I think the one that got the most, I'm going to say press, like media for weight loss, but that wasn't why it was, or it came into fruition and was being originally used. It's kind of like, a lot of medications that are used for different reasons, even off label, like looking at gabapentin or something like that. They started using it and obviously using it for diabetes and diabetic patients. And a byproduct of improving glucose management, insulin uptake, etc., they saw like weight loss. And they also saw a lot of other benefits with regards to something we talked about last night on the mentorship call, which is like food noise that a lot of people do experience for many, many different reasons. But that's really where, like, I think the name to fame and it became really very publicized is that one, which was a GLP. Now we have GLP plus GIP, GLP plus GIP. Glucagon is not quite on the market yet, but is being used, I will say, a lot.
Good way to put that. Yeah. So essentially, these drugs, GLP is something that is in our gut. It's something that is naturally released after meals, genetics, environment. I mean, other, health kind of conditions can all kind of impact this hormone. But again, like the idea as far as like an agonist is agonists like amplify is kind of how you want to think about it. So they amplify what you already have. So, I think a lot of people like don't know that this is a hormone that, your body actually produces, and the drug is amplifying, something that your body, already does. And with all that said, let's talk about how they work and then dive into how we see them, because there's definitely that black and white picture with it being so hype of, at least, I see on my social media feed, like some coaches are like, everyone is on it, or, client used this and phased in and out of this and blah, 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 and got all these results. And then other coaches are, it's the devil. It's the worst thing that you could do. It's the lazy way out. And we want to kind of give more nuance to that.
Yeah. I think that a great way to describe GLP, and I kind of pause on this because I think it can be also confused with something else, leptin, but a great way to kind of talk about GLP with regards to how it acts on the body is it's kind of like a really nice, it's like a natural way of your body saying, hey, I'm full. Like it's like a messenger like that. The difference between that and some people may be listening to this and saying, hey, well, isn't that what leptin does? Another hormone, leptin's coming from our fat cells, right? And so if that's our fat cells saying that you have enough energy stored, stop eating. GLP, like Sarah said, comes from your gut. Kind of similar messaging, like, hey, we're actively digesting food right now. Slow down this process. So it's more so like about managing that. And I think that for me is how my brain kind of distinguishes that. Kind of GLP is looking at saying, hey, I'm full, stop eating. It also slows down how fast your stomach empties food. And so this can be argued, like as Sarah said, with regards to like coaches, whether this is a good thing or not a good thing. It also tells your pancreas to release insulin when blood sugar is high. Very important thing. And it tells your liver to stop making extra sugar. And so that's how GLPs work. And then a GLP plus a GIP agonist, it's the GLP plus now we're adding a GIP component to it, which is helping your pancreas release insulin. It's working on fat cells, on how your body is storing the energy that is getting from the food that you're eating. Both of them are going to be really helpful with regards to inflammation in the body. And when we say that it helps with inflammation, this is where you have to just think globally. So that could
Mhm.
be blood sugar wise, but then also how is that affecting the brain? How is that affecting like the liver? How is that affecting how our body is metabolizing things? How it's affecting lipids? And I think like that's where for you and I, and as coaches, like we really get very excited about this. Especially like you said, like I was thinking about this when you said like, hey, this is something your body produces naturally. And this is, but taking a medication, I was kind of really making a parallel there with, I knew you probably knew I would go here, like with regards to like hormone therapy or, any type of hormone therapy, like thyroid medication, etc. And so for whatever reason, and many different reasons, and we'll talk about some very specific ones, some people's bodies may not be making enough, air quotes if you don't see me, enough of this said hormone, or maybe it's being dampened for many different reasons. And so this here again is like an opportunity of accentuating what our body does produce naturally, or perhaps is not producing enough of. Just kind of putting that together for what Sarah said, because that was like where I was thinking when as you were talking.
Right. And that, I mean, exactly, like that same idea with hormone therapy. Like there's things outside of our control. Like you didn't sign up to have a complete, hysterectomy and have your ovaries removed and go into a surgical menopause overnight, right? So, for you, implementing, the hormone therapy, was that tool to, replace something that you quote, should have had. And, and again, like there's so much like nuance to this conversation. We're going to stick on this medication in particular. But yeah, I think it's not black and white. It is kind of, where we want to go with that. Now, it's also not a crutch, and maybe I'll save that for later on, so you guys have to keep listening here. But, as far as like women's health, like let's talk about, so you mentioned inflammation. And we know inflammation can stem from, a lot of different things. But this came up yesterday actually on a call. A client in a lot of pain, and struggling with a lot of just systemic inflammation, and struggling to train and do cardio to lose weight. Now, for some people, losing weight is part of quote unquote balancing your hormones or improving your hormonal health. I know a lot of times you talk about the opposite, like eating more, and it might mean eating more, but for some people, losing weight is a great way to lower inflammation on the body, on the joints, put less stress on the heart, all of the organs, etc. So that is where, like, just one example where this could be a tool to maybe help somebody be able to walk more, increase their step count, start adding in some more cardiovascular activity, weight training without it like wrecking them and then just being in this vicious cycle of, just being, inflamed, joint pain, etc. If we have maybe this hormone, this tool in the background to kind of help start lowering that inflammation as they're already doing these health supportive behaviors.
Yeah. I think I cannot say it any more beautifully. And one thing we spoke on the call, and I think you really set this up well, is making sure our clients are prepared ahead of time to introduce this tool, right? So they are prepared mentally as well as physically. And using that example was like a prime one, because here you had a human being who was actively making substantial effort to eat well, try to move as much as possible, but yet, due to this person's size, due to this person's metabolic health, medicate, and again, we were talking about somebody who had, cardiovascular health issues, which was requiring potential medication that then put this person in pain so they can't move. And it was like this kind of like vicious hamster wheel. And this was, like you said, like a great opportunity where you had a person who had the knowledge, had the understanding that it's not just, take an injection, or now in this case, take an oral pill, regardless of which route you choose. Take this and do nothing. Like this person was well prepared, desire was there, doing everything possible, but yet just constantly like hitting this wall, just for their body saying, no, you can't move more. So I really liked how you set that up.
Yeah, and again, this is someone that already had, the foundations in place as best they could. And I mean, that even makes me kind of think of like, let's think about like our cases of, PCOS. We know in women with PCOS, inherently there's going to be some insulin resistance. Now, that often and can be quote unquote manage, with diet, lifestyle, training, and blood sugar basics, hydration. Again, like looking at, systemically how else to support this human being. Maybe it's, we're diving into their gut health, et cetera, et cetera. However, let's say, this woman with PCOS is doing all the things and she's not ovulating, which is a byproduct of insulin resistance in that case of PCOS. Well, if her goal is fertility and, trying to, get pregnant, perhaps implementing a GLP to help on that insulin sensitizing aspect of her fertility equation, perhaps that's a helpful tool for her. Again, especially because she's training, like she's putting together the balanced meals. Because on the flip side, if we don't have that education in place, Mare, tell us what happens when somebody goes on a GLP for blood sugar support and then doesn't have like a meal prep routine, like doesn't know how to put together a balanced meals. What might happen?
One of two things, which is never fun, is one, they're arguably probably going to do losing muscle, which is a big thing with regards to eating less. So if somebody is already doesn't have any, I'm going to say, food IQ with regards to, hey, I need to eat, they don't even know how much food they're eating, let alone have a consistency built throughout the day. When you then are turning down perhaps that craving or those hunger cues that could be these signals to the human being of, hey, you need to eat. If they don't already have that consistency in place or even that food awareness, that food IQ, that knowledge, you're just putting kerosene on a fire. So now you have a person who's literally under eating even more, and if they, again, aren't weight training, they aren't moving, they don't have these skills in place or these habits in place, then yes, as with any diet, not just being on a GLP, but being on any diet, any deficit for a long period of time, especially an extreme deficit, your predisposition to losing muscle is going to be there, to which having even less muscle, if you are already under muscle to begin with, that's not metabolically healthy, right? So
Right.
you can be in this loop-de-loop. On the flip side, somebody can start this medication, not have any of these things in place, and guess what? Nothing happens. They're truly dependent on utilizing a pill for an ill, injection for an ill, whatever it is, and they are incredibly disappointed, and they have made a investment and they didn't have the tools to maximize on that investment. And they're
Yeah.
very disappointed and probably frustrated in you as a coach.
And maybe in a worse place
Yeah.
metabolically and from a health standpoint due to that muscle loss, potentially under eating, et cetera. And that is where, like, adding like that nuance to this conversation. Cause as you can hear, like, Mare and I see this as a tool, right? Like, we're not telling, like, we're not out here painting this picture, this devil medication that's ruining the
Mhm.
world. Like, from what we know so far, we're seeing it as a tool. That said, what scares me about this being on every street corner and every TV commercial is a couple things. One, people that don't have this foundation, right? And are ending up with what I'm going to call, forgive me, Ozempic arms. And it's just this like skinny, fat, deflated, very weak look. And what's going to happen to those people, when they're, women going through perimenopause and what are we looking at as far as like your bone health and your cognitive functioning, like not having like that muscle mass, not having these, supportive behaviors in place because we're not eating enough calories, enough protein, we don't have that muscle, we haven't addressed sleep, hydration, like some of those more like basics.
Yeah.
That's one thing that scares me. And then the other thing that scares me too, Mare, that I just now thought about is these coaches painting this black and white picture of these drugs are the devil and you're lazy if you use them. What happens to that woman who decided to use it and now she feels ashamed and now she's not going to reach out and ask for help and guidance while she's on this? So as coaches in the industry, we can do a better job of having more nuanced conversations around these medications. And again, we're not prescribing. This is, working in conjunction with, a doctor here. We're not advocating black market, gray market stuff. Working in conjunction with doctors, with clients, putting out a message of nuance and putting out helpful information that, yes, is so boring and it's beating a dead horse, but it is, so important to support everybody and make sure that no one feels like, oh, I'm on this, so now I can't, tell anybody, and, and then they never, really make those improvements.
Yeah, I could not agree more. That's actually a conversation. There's a couple things you mentioned here, but that's a conversation I've had often with, honestly, like, I'm gonna say every client that I've opened this discussion with or has come to me, everybody has come to me very fearful of what would they, how do they present this conversation to their provider? How do they talk to their friends or family about it? I keep it very real and I tell them, number one, when it comes down to friends and even certain family members, I always tell them, like, number one, like, you don't owe anybody a justification for something that you feel that you need to do for your body to live the most healthiest life possible. Because ultimately, you will be trying to make a justification to somebody that it's not going to resonate with because it's not their decision. And then, two, I think it is, like you mentioned so well, that it is our responsibility to educate and presenting all the evidence that we do have, which is, let me tell you guys, like, there's so much nuance and so much really cool things that are coming out. But where Sarah and I kind of hold our red line in the sand is we get really excited about really cool shit, especially exciting stuff. And, you mentioned about coming out of this in a worse metabolic health if they don't have the tools and foundations. And you mentioned, bone loss, etc. And that is a very real thing. And somebody listening to this right now may pause in the wrong moment and be like, oh, well, I'm going to go look up. And here it says that, actually utilizing, tirzepatide helps improve bone formation and maybe suppress bone resorption. And while that may be true, or while that is true in animal and mechanistic studies, we don't have a lot of human evidence, to which we then have to take a bigger pause here. Can we and are we suggesting that somebody take a medication, but yet that potentially may help bone formation and then negate all the other things that are really going to help bone formation and suppress resorption? So looking at their hormonal profile, making sure they're eating enough, their mineral status, their weight training. Like, again, you have to have a conversation and say, it can't just be this medication, right?
Right. What's going to be the trump card here? Like, at the end of the day, it's going to be that, the training, like you said, like everything else that's providing that stronger stimulus.
Absolutely. Like you,
But
yeah.
people love to put blinders on and be like, "Oh, but this," and ignore, that information. And I think that's where, like, let's chat about, like, who we would not recommend these for.
Oh, yeah. Disorder, any, I will say right now, history of eating disorder. And I say that, but I want to be thoughtful. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying if you've ever had a history of eating disorder, you can never have it. Like, oh my gosh, no, no, no. But I'm going to say active, unmanaged history, present tense of eating disorder. You need to have, or disordered eating, you need to have a very thoughtful conversation with this person, especially if we're talking
Yeah.
about like restriction.
Yep. I agree. Because especially, like, with that restriction side of things, and this goes even back to, like, hunger hormones, like, somebody who has that background may have a different profile as far as how their hunger hormones, kind of respond, and whether that's genetics or epigenetics. So, anyway, you might trigger something, by, being on, one of these drugs. That active restriction can be triggering, even if it's, not intentional, or again, like somebody that, let's use that woman with PCOS, for example. So it's just important to have, like, that thoughtful team. And I know a lot of people talk about utilizing them for food noise. And this was something else that we chatted about on the call yesterday. And this one definitely gets me going a little bit because so often food noise. So let's even define that. Like, what even is that? Like, to me, food noise means maybe like, you just had a meal, like you're eating like adequately, but you're already thinking about your next meal. Or somebody invites you to go out to eat and you're studying the menu, or you're fixated on your meals before and after the meal. It might mean like you're at the gym and having like, thoughts about, food, or you're watching the Food Network while you do cardio. Um, I don't know. Like those are kind of some initial things that come to my mind. What comes to your mind with food noise?
I would say, yeah, I think that just to take exactly what you said and use different language that might hit for somebody else, I'm gonna say those ravenous cravings where
Yeah,
you are, again, like, just overconsumed with the thought of that next meal, and perhaps that meal that you are craving is, I'm gonna say, more I don't wanna say gluttonous, but, not like this square meal where you're looking at asparagus or whatnot, like, you are wanting to, rip the Band-Aid off Pandora's box here.
right. Break open that box of cereal.
Yeah, yeah. I think, those that chronic thinking of food is what I hear most often.
Yeah, and I think, like, for me, it's like, why is that happening? Like, what
Right.
is driving that, right? Like, we know, like, I mean, it can be like that form of, addiction. Like, I mean, okay, an alcoholic has alcohol noise, you could say.
Yeah.
So, what is going on, like, underneath the surface? Like, why are we having this food noise? What is going on emotionally? And I use this, too, like when I talk to clients about like body image, like fat is not a feeling, right? Like what's going on underneath that? That potentially, is impacting that seeking behavior. Or, like we were saying before, are you trying to survive off coffee? Like you are not regularly having balanced meals with protein and fiber. Well, no shit, Sherlock, you're going to be hungry and have the food noise. But you may not know that if you don't, understand kind of some basics with physiology. So, it's not always just the mental as far as what's driving that, but I think it's just very important to, like, understand that if you're looking to add this in to reduce food noise, getting really curious about where that is stemming from.
Yeah, we had, Sarah mentioned the call last night, and a really great example, one of the coaches on the call gave is that, her client, very busy, wasn't really eating during the day, and then at night, all of a sudden just ravenous and just like, eating a primarily a lot of her meals or a lot of her food in the evening, and both Sarah and I were like, that is not, food noise. That is just, hey, we need to restructure. And that's something that the coach, picked up on as well. It's like, hey, like, we actually need to, you're probably so ravenous and so hungry and just feel like you can't get enough because your body is actually hungry. We're not feeding it through the
Yeah.
day. And going through I think you have a mnemonic device for this, but when we talk about like hunger is a very subjective thing for a lot of people. And I know for myself, and I know you, and you have a mnemonic, I can't remember it, but asking ourselves, am I tired? Am I emotional? Am I thirsty? There were some other things that you said.
Halt. Are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired?
Halt. For those who didn't hear, she said halt. So that's it.
Halt. And what I always like to emphasize too, hungry, angry, lonely, tired, you might really be hungry.
Yeah.
You also might be hungry and need to be nourished in a different way.
Oh, I love that.
So, thinking what nourishes you outside of food.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I love that. I was going to go on a tangent, but I'll just leave it at that. I think that's
But we'll say, I would say, like, other, like, people are like, oh, you guys didn't talk about digestive health. At low, I haven't had, like, if you have motility, kind of issues, or, anything like, chronic, like, GI wise already, I may like kind of encourage somebody to pump the brakes there as far as introducing them. But I would say because our clients that are on them and that we're supporting are doing so under the guidance of very good medical oversight at these low dosages. And again, like managing, other things, I'm not really seeing the GI issues come up, for people like the nausea or um motility kind of things. And again, like if they do, then it's kind of like, okay, stepping back, like what else, can we do to support here? Or maybe dosing isn't correct,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah, I'll say on the more so with like, any type of nausea, I saw that more so with any client that was using like semaglutide. And it typically was around like either the day they injected or perhaps the next day. And then I never had a client once tell me that they physically couldn't eat because they were so nauseous and they were vomiting. Like I've never, ever, ever had that. I've had clients say, "Hey, yeah, I had a little wave of nausea, but it was, like, all fine, and it was good after, the next day." With tirzepatide, interesting enough, is I have had clients notice around injection day, like, maybe perhaps their stool got just, like, a little bit softer or a little
Hmm.
bit looser, to which we said, "Okay, well, let's try backing down that dose the next time." We stayed at that back down dose, and all was kinda smooth. So, I have never
But not
had.
too smooth.
Yeah, not too smooth. I've just never been had these horror stories, but then I think this goes back to any client that Sarah and I have worked with a provider and implemented these things has been so ready. Like, we have done all the things. Even I mean, I've shared with a client who's had really horrible time with digestive issues, and we have actually built her up to, but I also knew, like, metabolically, this was a really great tool for her, but she wasn't ready when we first started. She was not ready. I talked to her about that. She understood that, and we really walked her forward in a really great way to now we're in a great time and we're like, "Hey, you know what? I really think that introducing these is a here again, going back to that client we used you mentioned earlier on that was mentioned yesterday that this person was trying to do all the things and just really not being able to get ahead. And now for my client, she's in a beautiful spot where I was like, you know what? I really see this being a great service to you. And I provided her all the information, all the, research that I had and let her decide if this was something that she was comfortable doing. And funny enough, going back to what we've already said, I asked her, I said, "Do you have any questions or concerns?" And she said, "You know, I don't, but her concern was, she's like, I just don't want you to think I'm not willing to do the work." That was out of everything. That was her biggest concern was judgment that I thought that she wasn't willing to do the work or her friends because all she knew is friends who wanted to take this just to lose that last 10 pounds. And, I told her, I was like, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that you are just very adamant you will do the work. And I was like, but you need to hear me say I know you will do the work because you have been doing that work. And that is why you're a prime candidate to allow this to just facilitate all the awesome that you have built. It gave me a really big pause. I was like, wow.
I'm gonna end it here because that's a big wow, and that gets me. And I think again, that's why we need to have these more nuanced conversations as a coaching industry, I'll say. So powerful tools. Now, powerful isn't right for everybody. Context. We do, however, see them, as, that tool, and potentially one, to open a conversation, about.
And maybe, I mean, it's up to, I mean, you guys and it's up to Sarah and I ultimately. But maybe we'll do future episodes and they'll probably be shorter than this, but like really specific on GLP use with specifically perimenopause, menopause clients and just get very granular on how they could benefit or somebody that has, fatty liver or just
Right. And
very,
maybe an exit plan, of sorts, and phasing things. And
yeah.
I mean, yeah, we can get super specific on topics. So you guys let us know for real. Like if you have any requests, um, leave a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube or a review. It really does help us out. And we will see you next time when we are rewriting some sort of narrative.
Yay.